Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time, a CASOurce family production. In this episode, we're going to talk about relating to people, F3, and Coach K. Our guest today is David Yoder, Managing Partner at Abiding Wealth Advisors. David lives in Pinehurst, North Carolina with his wife and 3 kids and is the #1 Duke Blue Devil fan. David is one of the more likable individuals you can come across. When he walks into a room, you instantly trust him. And in a know, like, and trust world, having what David has is a tremendous asset. I have to say, it is all genuine. David is a registered investment advisor that immerses himself into the needs of his clients. David brings perspective of a financial services business owner who understands how to connect with people face to face. His investment knowledge and positive attitude will help any entrepreneur. With a great passion for life, business, and sports, we are excited to have David on this podcast. Let's get into it. David, welcome to the Entrepreneur Perspectives podcast. Great to have you.
Eric, thanks so much for having me today. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, well, let's get going with it then. So we are going to start with 10 questions requiring a more thoughtful response and end with 10 rapid-fire questions. You ready?
Let's go, man.
All right, so you heard the intro about you, but of course we can't do you justice in one opening statement. So tell us something real about you that the audience doesn't know.
Well, as you said, I am a giant Duke basketball fan. I got that honest from my dad when I was 6 years old. The first game I remember is watching Indiana, the 1987 Indiana Hoosiers beat Duke in the Sweet 16, and I was hooked from that point on. But I've been a huge sports fan my whole life. But as a Duke fan, I never had really a football team that I could get behind. So something real about me that the audience probably doesn't know is that when I went to graduate school at NC State, Phillip Rivers was there, and I adopted NC State as my football team, and so that gives me really a unique perspective in sports. As a Duke basketball fan, I'm always expecting them to find a way to win even when they're behind. And as an NC State football fan, I'm always expecting them to lose even when they're ahead.
That's right.
So
that's perfect.
But it does perfect my sports hatred of North Carolina too.
That's right, yeah. It's very well-rounded hatred for the Tar Heels. That's great.
So we've got, at NC State football, pretty big game Thursday night against Louisville. We'll see if they can contain Lamar Jackson. I highly doubt it, but something to be excited for on a Wednesday.
It is. So why the difference, though? Because probably a little bit before your time, NC State was the team. And Duke, really wasn't a whole lot before then until Coach K came around, and we'll get into him later. But what's the difference, right? Why is NC State where they are versus with a talent-rich area versus a place like Duke? And we're talking different sports here, and I get all that, but we're in basketball, football. Why is it such a difference now? Why is NC State struggling so much and Duke is on the complete opposite end of it?
I think it's a culture for the programs. I think if you go back to NC State as recently as the early 80s and into the later 80s with Jim Valvano, when they won the national championship in 1983, that was their second title, and that was as many as North Carolina had. Carolina won in 57 and 82, and Duke had none. So to your point, and before that, the 1974 Wolfpack was one of the best teams of all time with David Thompson and Tommy Burleson, and back at a time when the ACC could only get one team in the ACC tournament or in the NCAA tournament. So I think really, and honestly, I don't even know. I was just in grade school when it happened. But the scandal with Valvano in the late 80s and NC State as a university kind of going to the other extreme to avoid the appearance of any impropriety at a time when Duke was ascending and at a time when Dean Smith was ready to get any player that he wanted, and every single year Duke and Carolina developed this rivalry, which now most would agree is one of the best rivalry in all sports. NC State was declining while Duke was ascending and Carolina was at the top, and there just hasn't been room for 3 programs in college basketball.
Yeah, in the state.
And now it's kind of a culture where, like I said, Duke basketball, you expect excellence, you expect to win. And if you talk to NC State fans, of which I'm one of them, you expect to find a way to screw it up. So it's interesting that how the mentality can kind of work in that way, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes.
Right. Yeah, the narrative changed, and it sounds like they got disrupted internally, but then also competition came up, right? Other places were ready to make their move. We're going to talk about disruption. We love talking about that, but it happens, right? It happens in sports, and like all of a sudden, one team's gone, other teams rise up, and the other, they beat the competition, and off they go. So, pretty amazing to watch, and it happens all the time.
All the time, and I think that happened with NC State, and they've been trying to recover from that for a long time.
Yeah. And then they had Russell Wilson, as we know, and then he left to Wisconsin for bigger things, and then now look at him, right? So David and I, of course.
What was the stat? A couple weeks ago, State had 4 starting quarterbacks. I understand that Andrew Luck or Jacoby Brissett wouldn't be starting. I understand that Mike Glennon is no longer starting in Chicago. But how many other schools, maybe 1 or 2 in the history, have had 4 starting quarterbacks at the same time?
It's not a lot.
And State finished maybe 3rd or 4th in the Atlantic as their best finish.
Yeah.
I mean, so they've really had some great quarterbacks, but haven't been able to do anything with those
any
quarterbacks.
Young quarterbacks listening. I mean, I think you know where to go to. You got to go to QBU, otherwise known as NC State, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. All right. So now, taking a little bit away from that and moving into the business world and your day-to-day work at Abiding Wealth Advisors, what is your focus and what's the ultimate goal for the business and then yourself?
So my role at Abiding Wealth is I work with clients as a personal financial planner. And so that means that I'm going to sit down with somebody and learn about their goals and their dreams and what they've done thus far. And if I'm doing my job right, it's educating them on all things financial planning. One of the things I think that I feel very strongly about is there's not a lot of baseline education at any point in our school curriculum or out there for somebody. Is once you graduate from college or once you enter the workforce, here are some smart things that you need to do in order to put yourself in a good position. There's a lot of information, but there's no requirement for anybody to learn those things at any point in our school curriculum. So what I find is when people come and meet with me, they often are very unsure about the right things to do, and they think that it's very complicated or they're very uncomfortable talking about it. And so my job is just to make those things that they think are complicated not so complicated, because they really aren't. Just help them to get organized, educate and empower them. And then once we have a plan in place, to just work with them and walk with them through the years. And one of the best parts about my job is I can develop really good relationships long-term with my clients, get to know their families, and be in a position when there is a major life event, good or bad, to be there for them and to help them and be somebody they can talk to.
Yeah. And you have a way, I've seen this because I've known you for many years, of relating to people on the front end. And then you carry that out, like you were just talking about, for many years, which I think is exactly what you're talking about here. Whether it's talking to them about sports or talking to them about their family or the good and the bad times. That's something that I think is very important. And it's not so much all the knowledge and the facts of what someone knows of being an advisor, a financial advisor. It's everything else that goes into it. It's the emotional side of things. It's the human connection, I think, that you're talking about and that people are looking for, because it comes across in many areas as very confusing, right? You pick up a newspaper and you read about the market and it's confusing. And I think it's hard for people to understand that, and that's why they need someone like you just said, to simplify it. And I think that's what you're coming across with and saying now, which it makes a lot of sense to me to hear it based on knowing you for many years.
Yeah, I think that's, if I were to boil it down into a very simple mission, when I interact with somebody, it is to develop common ground. So like you said, sports is that's great in so many different fields because so many guys especially speak the language of sports, and we can instantly relate about what happened over the weekend or the craziness that is the NFL season this year. I mean, Jacksonville beating Baltimore 44-7. Where did that come from? You know, and those kind of things can build the initial trust, and then you need to, whatever business you're in, whatever your profession is, constantly seek to be good at what you do, so that when you have that trust, you can deliver for your client. But I also think you should be able to, with maybe very few exceptions, distill what you do in such a simple way that somebody can leave the meeting with you and tell somebody else what just happened. And it shouldn't be, David Yoder is smart and I trust him. It should be, this is what we did and this is why we're doing it. And to be able to look back downstream and understand why a decision was made regardless of the outcome.
Right. Now, has that become your ultimate goal for, like, as you work with clients, or just, and now I'm speaking more about your business and you, is to be there for your clients for a long time, to be that trusted relationship? Or what does that look like for you, for your business and for yourself?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, if I'm doing my job right, it's to serve the people that have entrusted me in this very important area. It is for somebody to be better off because of their relationship with me. And that, again, that's not necessarily helping them to pick the right stock or the right fund, but to help them think about things that maybe they didn't think about before. You know, one area obviously being, are you protecting your family from your untimely death? Are you protecting your family if you get in a car accident and you can't work? The things that they're not required to do, but I'm in a unique position as the planner when we look at all the pieces to make them aware of. But then also just to be somebody that speaks encouragement into their lives, and to be somebody that is listening to them and helping breathe life into the things that are important for their future.
Yeah. I think that's outstanding. Well, I mean, and it's something that you take very serious, and I think that's awesome. And you take the role seriously, and you look at it. I think I like how you said, you know, someone to be better off because of the things that you guys have talked about, because of the things that you've done for someone. That's meaningful, that's impactful, and that's amazing. Now, if we were to back off of that for a second, and you're not a financial advisor, when you're not a financial advisor and you're out in your life, what is your passion away from all that?
So it's very similar. I think one of the biggest areas that I've seen a deficiency in our society, you know, even from the time when you and I were growing up to today, is we just don't have as many real men today as we did when we were growing up. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the statistics, you know, over 50% of kids grow up without a dad today. And that's just a mind-boggling number to me, because I won the parent lottery. My dad, you know, there was a program that I went through called Men's Fraternity, and it kind of identifies the characteristics of a real man. And the 4 characteristics are someone who rejects passivity, someone who accepts responsibility, someone who leads courageously, and someone who expects God's greater reward. And so the format of this program is we'd watch a video, and then we'd get together in a small group. And I remember in my small group, all these guys were kind of unpacking their wounds of a broken relationship with their dad, or maybe it wasn't perfect. And I was just kind of checking the boxes, you know, because my dad was that guy. So because I was really blessed in that regard, one of my main passion is helping men grow as leaders and helping them to kind of mature, as opposed to, and I love sports, but you and I can have a very surface level conversation about what's going on in the NFL and never go any deeper than that. And I think the real substantive stuff is when we can develop a relationship and connect and grow deeper. And I've been able to experience that through things like F3 and Every Man a Warrior. And it's the most life-giving feeling for me, because I see other people grow and develop, and that's what makes me come alive.
Yeah. So you're doing this, like you just said, you're doing this not only in your business, but you're doing it in your everyday life. I mean, it's who you are. And that's something that fascinates me about doing this podcast, is there's a common theme in people that are having success in their life. And it has to do with they carry this out no matter where they are, no matter what they're doing. And you can have balance and you can do different things. And like you said, you can have fun, but you're genuine in everything that you're doing. And I think that's pretty awesome.
I wish I was consistent 100% of the time.
Of course.
But I know the formula, at least, right?
That's right. You're on your way. So, and as we talk about that, and as we talk about helping other people, we talk a lot about protecting businesses, whether it's insurance or staying relevant or creating content. And so much of that in protecting a business is proper planning, like you've been talking about. And I'm just curious, from your vantage point, and this is, again, generally speaking, do you believe people are being led down a good path in regards to their financial planning overall?
I think financial planning, like almost everything out there today, there's just so much information available because of technology. I think people, when they're trying to find out which financial planner should I use, just like they would for anything else they're going to do, Google search and get a review. And so I think, in general, I think most of the things that are happening around financial planning are well-intentioned. You know, for instance, there's a kind of a disrupting thing that's happened in our industry, which is the fiduciary rule 1502, and I think the intent of that rule is really good. And it says that a financial planner or a financial advisor has to do what's in the best interest of the client. They're a fiduciary. That's, in my opinion, there's no question at all that is a good thought. How it's implemented sometimes and the ways that are implemented may not be optimal. But I think the right questions are being asked, but I do think a lot of the players in our business are thinking about the dollar signs instead of the people. And so it really just depends on, just like if you went to a doctor's office, regardless of where you go, you can get somebody who's really patient-centric, great, whether at a huge practice or a single practitioner, or you might get somebody who's focused on other things that may not be perfectly aligned with the patient's interests. So that's not really maybe not the answer you were looking for in terms of being straightforward. I do tell my clients I'm a recovering analytical, you know, because I went to graduate school for economics, and economists always say on the one hand and on the other hand. So that was kind of an economist answer. But I think for the most part, the industry is doing some good things. I think the focus on the certified financial planning designation, having a greater prominence, I think that's a good thing, because that's a designation that's not easy to get, that takes a lot of effort and already has that fiduciary standard in place. So that's really good for clients, customers.
And that makes sense. And I think what you're saying too is on the fiduciary rule, it goes without saying, right? So many of these rules are put in place. It's like, of course you should act in the best interest of your client, of your patient, of whoever that is. And it's interesting that those rules exist, but they have to exist because there are people who aren't doing that thing. But like you're saying, generally speaking, there's just a lot of information out there, and overall people are doing well with it. And that's why you exist, to continue to try and do more with it. But at the same time, while all this is going on and the fiduciary rules of the world are coming out, and there's other things, disruption is a word we've used a couple of times already, and it's a big topic in many industries, be it the finance industry, insurance, accounting, legal. They're all being disrupted at a rapid pace. I'm sure you've seen it. But being a planner yourself, what type of future disruption do you see coming about in the financial services world?
I think so much of it is technology driven. I think with the different softwares from a planning standpoint, the way to analyze different portfolios, the way to analyze different plans, I think we've seen on the investing side of the equation a major disruption with robo advisors, and starting with Vanguard, who John Bogle, 60, 70 years ago, his main thesis was don't try to find the needle in the haystack. Buy the haystack as cheaply as you can. And the advent of low-cost mutual funds and low-cost exchange-traded funds, there's kind of been a race lower from a fee standpoint, which in most cases is really, really good. So that's a big disruption, and we've seen that on the investing side with, 5 or 6 years ago, 17% of all funds were passively managed, which would be in kind of a Vanguard low-cost approach, and that number's almost doubled.
Wow.
In the past 6 or 7 years. So that's a huge disruption. And that, again, I'm a recovering analytical, so I can get in the weeds really quickly. But sometimes that takes the thinking out of investing too. And then people are owning an index that has a company like Tesla that's lost $10 billion over the past 7 years, and the market value's gone up sevenfold. So things that don't make a lot of sense to me as a value guy. But I think the increase in passive investing, the availability of technology, and also the consolidation, Eric, I think with the new rules and the cost of doing business, I think we're going to continue to see bigger investment shops acquire smaller investment shops. And that's going to be a disruption that could certainly impact smaller groups like ours. And so we have to really be on our game in terms of what technologies we use and making sure that we are up to date in all those areas, because there are things that are outside of our control that may impact how we do things in the future.
Right. And so then communicating with the marketplace on the different things that you're doing and staying ahead of the game and understanding what all is being disrupted in your business, that's marketing, right? Letting people know about it. And that as well, I see that as a major change in all industries. I don't care what business you're in, marketing's changed. But from your standpoint, what differences do you see in marketing today, say, versus maybe 10 years ago?
Well, a couple big ones. So 10 years ago, that was pre-financial crisis. 2007, I think a lot of people were very comfortable with a name. I think a lot of people were very comfortable with Wachovia, with Lehman Brothers, with Merrill Lynch. I just named 3 giants and only one of them is left today. And I think when the last financial crisis happened and a lot of those names that have been associated with stability and safeness weren't around, I think the investor put their focus on their relationship with the individual, regardless of where they were. And they also said, I'm not going to blindly trust an institution with my money. I need to become more educated myself. So that's a huge change today, that as opposed to how business was done 10 years ago. And then I think the second one you mentioned, the way that we market using social media, the way that we get our message out there, the way that individuals get their news today. When you and I were growing up, we'd watch SportsCenter for 30 or 35 minutes in the morning. ESPN's ratings are plummeting in the traditional news outlets because that's not how people consume media anymore. We go to ESPN.com or we go to other websites and we get the highlights, and then we're able to read our articles online. So I think we're kidding ourselves in the financial industry if we think people are still reading the Wall Street Journal paper edition, or they're reading a newsletter that we mail out. Now, we have to have a social media presence, whether it be a blog or whether it be a Twitter account or writing articles of different sorts to educate not only our clients, but marketing to potential clients.
Yeah. And that's where their attention is, right? Like you're saying, their eyes are somewhere else. They're paying attention somewhere else. Now you have to go and put yourself in front of them in a genuine way that, maps itself to today, 2017 and beyond. 2018 is around the corner. So
yeah. And I would also bifurcate it. I still think for a lot of my retirees, that what I just said isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of them, while they have moved into the 21st century, the methods that would have worked 10 years ago would work today. But I think for our generation and younger, you definitely have to be aware of how the consumption of news and how people get business, how that's changed.
Right. Well, that's you tying it all together and understanding history. And when you can combine the history, whether you're talking about sports or business, and you understand why NC State was a certain way and why they are today, you can put all of that together into a pot, right? And come out and understand how to communicate with different people. Use the tried and true methods of before and adjust them and adapt them to what's going on today. Because not
Absolutely.
everyone, like you're saying, is doing the same thing. You might have a client that he gets all of his news today still from the Wall Street Journal because he doesn't believe in getting on Twitter or Facebook or, you know, any other website. So it's combining all of that, and I think that works for you very well because you are a relatable person. You are someone who understands where they are in their lives, and you're not going to judge them for that. You're going to play in their world.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think people also, even though things have changed, I think regardless of how you're engaging somebody, they know if you are faking it or if you're really paying attention to them.
Right.
You know, if you're distracted or if you are really intent on being in the moment with them and caring about them. And so, and I that translates across businesses, you know, to make sure that you truly are focused on who you're working with instead of thinking about what next to say in your brain or thinking about what you have later on to do and just kind of paying a lip service.
Yep. Yeah, so on the social media, and going back to that social media component of it, that is just the opportunity. That's the window into someone else or into a conversation that leads to a phone call, that leads to a meeting. So yes, you can do business all online, but I would urge a lot of people, no matter what age they are, that's just the opportunity to connect in a way that you've been unable to connect before because it didn't exist. I can have a client in California because of a Instagram conversation that we had that leads to a phone call, that leads to a meeting, that leads to a business getting done. It didn't all just take place within Instagram or Facebook, right, or any of these other platforms. So that's the thing I think really to understand is it's just another way to engage with people and to show that, like you're saying, that you truly care about what they're talking about. Because you engage and they say something and they're a fan of NC State, you can now have a conversation with them about that. And that's nice, and people like that.
Right. As long as they don't learn that I'm a Duke basketball fan.
That's right. You gotta, yeah. That's okay. I like confusion's good because then you have to have that aha moment like we've had here today on this podcast. So now moving on to that, you've mentioned F3 already in this. We talked about it at the very beginning. But from your standpoint, tell us about F3.
So F3, first of all, it stands for Fitness, Fellowship, and Faith. It is a workout group, and it started in Charlotte on New Year's Day, 2011. And the guys have just kind of figured it out as they've gone along. But originally it just started out as a way for guys to get together to work out. It's outside, it's free. It's led by individuals of the group. So somebody will sign up to lead a workout, or in F3 terms, be the Q. And it's kind of boot camp style, military style workouts. And people come for the fitness because they have somebody who's overzealous like myself that just tells you how great it is. And what really gets them coming back is the brotherhood or the fellowship that they experience. And then there's a faith component. F3 is not affiliated with any particular faith, but where they're going with it is I am third. So anybody who has been in F3 a long time and is kind of bought in hook, line, and sinker like me, you're looking for opportunities to serve and to put yourself behind other people because you've discovered that that's what brings you the most joy. You're not necessarily looking to benefit yourself or improve your name to do more business with somebody, but you've really figured out that the things that bring you the most joy in life are the stuff that you give away and bring life to other people. So I don't know if I'm really doing it justice. It's not a group of guys that are already in good shape when they come and post or work out. We have people that are in special forces, and we have people that are 300 pounds. And you do what you can do, and you get encouraged by other men. But for me, I think the most important thing is 3 or 4 times a week, I get to go early in the morning before my family's awake, so I'm not sacrificing any time with them, and see my best friends, and it gives me fuel throughout the day and throughout the week, really to be energized. And if I have a problem in my life or something crazy going on, I've got these brothers that I can talk to that I know are going to be there for me, and I can do that for them too.
I think it's awesome that it's for anybody, right? This goes for myself or anybody that, talks about, finding excitement in what you do, finding a connection. And so it, like you said, it carries you for the rest of the day. It carries you for many days. It carries you on this podcast. It keeps you going. And no matter what it is, whether it's F3 or something else, I think it's hugely important. But obviously, you, like you said, brought in completely. And I've met other people that are part of F3, and they have the same type of stance on it that you do. So I think it's important to talk about it like you've done here. And hopefully other people find out about it through this podcast and are able to join F3 and become, more involved with it. But at the very least, you love it and you'll continue to do it. And I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, if you're listening, f3nation.com. It, like I said, it started with one workout, January 1st, 2011. There was just a feature on the Today Show a few months back, and now there's over 18,000 members of F3 Nation in over 15 states. It's a no revenue business except for all the dollars that we spend on getting F3 shirts, so everybody can know we're part of F3.
Right,
but there's no fee to join. There's nobody running a profit center, and so again, I truly believe the best things in life are the ones that you can give away for free and really invest in somebody else, and this is a perfect example of that.
I get it. Well, now let's talk about someone that you're crazy about, because we know that you're the craziest of crazy Duke Blue Devil fans. And I think someone that also likes to give back is Coach K. I want to talk about him a little bit. I want to talk about, from your vantage point, his leadership style and what has made him so successful. And maybe, if you could, and I'm not sure if you do this, but how do you apply that to your business?
Yeah, so again, Coach K got to Duke before I was born. He arrived in the winter of 80, first part of 80, and I was born in October of 80. And when I was in grade school, from kindergarten to 8th grade, 9 years, Duke went to the Final Four 7 times. So just to talk about a spoiled kid growing up with a basketball team and the excellence. But I think for Coach K, his leadership style, despite all the success, the all-time winningest coach in college basketball history, 5 national championships, 12 Final Fours, 3 Olympic gold medals. Yes, he had LeBron and those great players. But to never come to a point in his career where he says, you know what? I've accomplished enough. I'm satisfied with that. I don't want to push myself any further. And so the statement that I've heard the most around the Duke basketball following their program for all these years is next play. So regardless of what just happened, or regardless of what's coming up in the distant future, what really matters is the next play, the next possession in a basketball game, the next meeting that you have, the next time you have to go home and see your kids. You can't change anything that's happened. And you can't do anything beyond your control, but you can be in that next play 100% in the moment. And I think he's embodied that. Because if there's anybody in the sporting world that could rest on their accomplishments, it would be him. You know, he's 70 years old. There's nothing that he hasn't accomplished in college basketball. So that would be one thing that I think is applicable to everybody. You can only control this moment. Or not control, but you can only have an impact in this moment. Not in what's happened or not what's going to happen tomorrow, but only right now. And then the second thing, just from a basketball side, his willingness to change and evolve. So if you go back to the great Duke teams of the 80s and 90s, you had a more traditional, you'd have a good point guard. Bobby Hurley was the best point guard from that time period. You'd have a traditional 2 and 3, and you have two big guys. Typically, one of them would be a ability to shoot like a Leighton or a Ferry, but it was more of the half-court, tough defense basketball, and that worked for a long time. And then the game evolved, but he was kind of at the forefront of evolving it. And then he's gone more to a one big with more versatile players. But year to year now, and he's changed his recruiting philosophy. Hey, we're going to go the one and done route. If he has a Jahlil Okafor, they're going to be focused about pounding the ball inside. If he has Jabari Parker, he's going to feature him. He's willing to tailor the way he coaches a team to the best players. He's flexible. You know, he's stubborn in a lot of ways, but he's flexible in that I'm going to figure out what pieces I have, and I'm going to make them. I'm going to give myself the best chance by adapting myself and my team. So that I think his flexibility over his whole career arc, and also the way the college game's changed today, with the turnover in players year to year, I think that's the second thing that would really stand out. And can we be flexible in our lines of work to the adapting way business is done today?
Yeah.
Or are you going to start engaging social media, or just swear it off and let it pass you by? You know, so I think those are the two things to me that really stand out that have application to what we do here.
Yeah. He invents the future of basketball, of college basketball. And he's, like you said, he's at the forefront of it, and he's evolving it. And everything that I think these coaches in sports, obviously, you know me with our sportspreneur blog and brand that we have going on. I mean, we can tie in sports all day long, and everything you just said absolutely relates to what we do in business. And I think it's awesome. And I guess I would take it to an article that I thought of when we were looking at doing this podcast. I'm like, what's an article that we like to tie in all the time to a podcast interview that would apply to our guests? And the one that came up to mind, it wasn't a Duke article, because I knew we could talk about Coach K like we just did, and probably we'll touch on him a little bit more in a bit. But it's the Oregon Ducks up-tempo offense, and it was called How the Oregon Ducks up-tempo offense can be applied to your business. And if you remember, not that long ago, Chip Kelly was running Oregon, and he evolved college football, right? He took college football offenses and he created more opportunities for themselves by increasing the amount of plays that they could get. So we likened it to business with that up-tempo offense, with activity, with sales. You know, your business partner talks a lot about this. Shane Snively, he talks a lot about getting out there. You have to see more people to give yourself more opportunities. You, David, are an activity machine, and I want to understand how you do it with all the other stuff that you've just talked about, from family to F3 to your interest in sports and everything else. How do you continue to stay in front of your existing clients, prospects, and everything else that you have going on?
So I was really fortunate when I started in the business to have a great mentor, Monroe Diefendorf Sr. And one of the first things that he taught me is that everybody, regardless of what business you're in, fits into one of four different categories. And so you can either be an unconscious, incompetent person, which means that you're not good at what you do, but you don't know that you're not good. So that person has no hope, because they think they're really good, but they're really not. You can be somebody that's consciously incompetent, which is where I was when I started in the business. and that was somebody that realizes they're not very good and they need help. Okay? You can be an unconscious competent. And so that would be Michael Jordan jumping. He's great at dunking the ball and hitting his head on the rim, but he can't tell you why. Those are the gifts God gave him. You can't work at that and get to that level. You can do some things, but you'll never do it. And then they're just confident. And they're good, and they know why they're good, and they know the formula that goes into that. So for me, if I'm doing the things that I should be doing, the activity should be there. And I know for me, in order to get the activity as a conscious competent, I have to get 10 referrals a month. I have to schedule at least 30 meetings a month. I have to ask for business at least 10 times a month during those meetings. And if I do all of that, then the revenue, the sales come. And if I'm doing that, I'm taking care of my clients. So the only reason that I have the activity that I do today is because my mentor taught me how to become a conscious competent by measuring your activity. And I have to think with Chip Kelly, and I don't know what the metrics were, but you got to think if they're getting a playoff every 6 seconds, that's one, when they're preparing in the off season as part of their culture, they have 2, 3, 4, 5 different things that they're measuring. Maybe it's, hey, everybody who's on offense, I don't care if you're a 310-pound left tackle or scat back, you got to be able to run this fast in a 40, or you have to be able to run this many miles with pads on. I don't know what his metrics were, but he understood the cookbook to get to that point that gave him an advantage over everybody else, that they could run more plays, that they had better endurance, that they were faster, and had phenomenal success at a place that hasn't seen that success before or since.
Right. And that's what you're saying is it's all a byproduct of everything that you create. It's all a byproduct of, if you do the first thing, everything else will come along, including the appointments, including the closing the business, and even including the most important thing is being there for your clients.
And if you don't, it won't. It's
Right.
not going to magically happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you said, the cookbook. There's a recipe there. Follow it, and you stick to it. But then you have to have that persistence of no different than, I'm sure, waking up for F3 3, 4, 5 times a week before your family's even awake when it's dark and cold outside. That takes a certain type of person to be able to do those things.
At first it's tough, and then it just becomes
a part of yeah. No, it makes sense. So now we're going to take a look at your entire business and everything that's going on. What is the number one pain you have right now in growing your company?
I think the balance between maintaining a deep personal relationship, which is, I think, one of the things that my clients would say is the best part of working with me, while trying to scale and bringing in the right types of technology to aid in the planning process. And I feel like within the past year, I'm really blessed to work with Shane Snively as a business partner that handles a different side of the business from me. I think we have really excellent tools that can help me do what I love to do, which is to make the financial planning process understandable and empowering for the client. And so but that's been a big growing pain, is to try to manage the personal relationship and the personal touches that are kind of time consuming with scaling a business from a technology standpoint.
I think that's a lot of people's concern right now, because it's moving very fast, and it's only going to move faster. So that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you being open on that question and all the questions, really. And I think, like you said early on, your goal is for people to be better off because of maybe the time they spent with you. And Hey, David, I'm better off by spending this time with you, right? Just no different than when you walk into my office. We always have a good time. You always have a smile on your face. And I think the people that listen to this podcast are better off for hearing the wisdom that you are giving us. So I appreciate that on the thoughtful side of
well, anything
this podcast.
I have comes from somebody that's better and smarter than me, that's seeded into me. So I appreciate that, Eric, and I appreciate what you're doing too.
Well, it's a humble response, and we appreciate that. Don't go anywhere, because we are going into some rapid fire questions right after this message. We would like to take a quick moment to tell you about an organization we work closely with called RODS, which stands for Racing for Orphans with Down Syndrome. We are a proud supporter of RODS Racing. The RODS mission is to nurture a positive image of Down syndrome, to promote awareness for the adoption of orphans with Down syndrome, and by participating in organized athletic races and awareness events. Ultimately, the goal is to find homes for all orphans with Down syndrome. Because of our relationship with the founder of RODS, Brady Murray, we are honored to be able to contribute our work in the area of marketing to create even more awareness around RODS and their mission. You can learn more about RODS at rods.org. So that ends the thoughtful round of this, and now we're going to move on to the rapid fire round. So we're going a little bit more quick, and going to throw some questions at you. Some might be a little bit more difficult, so if you have to, take your time with those. But you ready to get going?
Let's do it.
All right. What book are you reading right now?
So a couple of them, Free to Lead, which is actually the story of F3, shocker there. And also, part of my daily routine almost every day is to spend some time in the Bible. Okay.
Now, Free to Lead, is that a book that you are reading hardcover, paperback? Is that a Kindle book, Audible?
I'm reading it paperback, and it's one of those that you could read in a day or two, but it kind of goes through the story of how F3 started and why it's had this wildfire catching effect of spreading, and kind of goes in depth with some of those principles that we touched on a little bit earlier.
Now, who wrote that? Was this book written by the founders of it or somebody else?
Yeah, so there are two founders. And one of the things about F3 is when you join the first workout, you get a nickname. And so it's always funny. My wife will be asking me, well, who was at the workout? And I'm saying McFly and Captain D and Flying Tomato and these ridiculous names. And she's like, okay, what are you guys doing? But so I don't really honestly know their real names, but Dread and OBT. F3 Dread was he was in the Army for 10 years, and when he got into corporate America as a lawyer, he was missing that connectivity, that brotherhood that he had in the Army, and that was really a big part of the genesis for what F3 became. Even though they didn't come up with a name to start out, they just wanted a workout group that kind of simulated that brotherhood, and then it morphed and evolved into the organization that it is today.
It's a great story. So what is your favorite social media network?
So it's actually GroupMe. I don't know if you're familiar with GroupMe. And GroupMe is very similar to Twitter, but it's confined to a specific group. And so, unsurprisingly, the GroupMe affiliation that I have is with my F3 Sandhills guys. So throughout the day, if somebody wants to post a message, we're the only ones that can see it. So it's kind of a confined Twitter with a lot less noise, but we're just kind of cracking jokes on it all day.
Okay. And what's the social media app that has you most confused?
So I did see Sportspreneur just got a presence on Snapchat, so I got to admit that I am not up on Snapchatting. So I need to.
Yeah, and
I need to dust off.
As all of our frequent listeners, which there's, I'm sure there's so many, but Snapchat is a common answer from our guests, and that's a major reason why Sportspreneur is on Snapchat. And I think it's a little bit of a let your hair down type of social media. You can have fun with it because let's face it, like you said, on this GroupMe on your F3 board, you guys are you're making fun of each other. You're having fun with it. You can't be serious all the time, and you got to enjoy yourself. And then you have to find those connections. You have to find different ways to connect with people. So There's a lot going on with Snapchat. There's no doubt about it. It's confusing, but like anything else, once you give it a little time, it's not as confusing. But a very common answer nonetheless. So what phone app is most important to you?
My GroupMe app.
Okay. Consistent, David. I like it. So what's
or uninteresting, however you want to frame it.
Yeah, there you go. No, I think, but it's the common theme that you have going, and like I said before, a lot of guests have that. It's consistent with everything that they're doing, and you're passionate about F3, so why not just have it embedded in all of your life? So what's the one thing you would tell an up-and-coming entrepreneur to focus on?
Piece of advice that my dad gave my brothers and I a long time ago is, this is a guy, PhD, really bright, but he said the smartest man in the world is the one who knows how to ask for help and who to ask for help. And so I think if you want to be successful in whatever field or whatever career, I think you have to find those people that you admire, that you would like to be like, and humbly seek advice from them and find out what they did. And if you do that, I think you can avoid a lot of mistakes. I think you can really expedite your curve regardless of what business you're in.
That's great advice, and I think we need to put stuff like that, along with a lot of other things you said, in our show notes. And I'm sure there's many people like your father that have helped you got you where you are today. But tell us one person that you want to identify right now that helped you get where you are today.
Yeah, so specifically in my business, I mentioned him before, but Monroe Diefendorf Sr., when I came to Pinehurst in 2005, I was 24, and I looked like I was 18. And I just started with a financial services company Chrissy's parents lived here, my wife. By the way, I'm blessed with 3 outstanding children and a wife of 15 years. But I didn't know anything about sales or the industry. And so I met Monroe Diefendorf through the local barbershop singing group. Me as this 24-year-old kid with all these 70-year-old guys who retired. And I asked him, I said, hey, could I pick your brain over coffee? And he just took me under his wing and met with me weekly and really invested in me. And I learned later on that he ran a financial services company for Mutual of New York for 40 years. And he used to take the subway into the city every day with a little 3x5 index card that had the initials of all of the agents that worked for him. And his whole day was ordered around, what can I do for Eric Kazimoff today to make him better? What can I do for David Yoder to make him better? And so, he made a career out of helping people, and he told me that his payoff was in seeing me succeed. And so both for the start that he gave me in terms of teaching me the fundamentals, but also in the bigger lesson of the best joy that you can get is by investing in somebody else and seeing them succeed. That's the lasting stuff. He really made a huge difference in my life.
That's a good story. So moving on from that a little bit, and we're going to go back to your college basketball roots, which I know they exist. The recent scandal in the news of college basketball. I want you to identify and tell us if you think the game that you love so much is in trouble.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it has been for a long time. I think the product is not what it used to be. And part of that is AAU and the lack of individual skills development before the kids get to college, and part of that is the one and done rule. And then this is kind of the ugly underbelly where, if we're being honest with ourselves, we kind of all knew this stuff is going on, and we don't know the full extent of how much it's going on. But I think the thing that's really good for college basketball is sometimes it takes a nuclear bomb. I don't use those words lightly, but some big event like this that is big enough to put college basketball on the front page of ESPN.com on September the 26th. Think about that with football in full swing. Sometimes you need an event like that in order to fix the game. maybe people are more willing to recognize that there are problems that need to be fixed. Whether it's, hey, we need a rule like baseball has, where kids can go straight out of high school to the NBA, but if they go to college, they got to be there 3 years. So you have more continuity to the game. You give them a chance to be a student athlete.
No, it's going to take, and that takes a lot of collaboration.
They have some major things to navigate.
Yeah.
In light of everything that's gone on, and I'm not sure we know all of it yet.
Right. No, I think you're right, and I think you make a good point. Though it's the eye-opening experience that they're dealing with right now, and they're going to have to address this issue. And I think we've talked about in the past of having that 3-year rule. It's just so that you have to have a lot of collaboration to get that done, because the NBA doesn't want those kids coming out of high school. They don't feel like they're ready for it. College says, let them go. So now what do? You're at that crossroads of multiple businesses, trying to figure out what's next. And I think it would go to your point that you've made often on the show, is what is the best thing for the client? And perhaps in this situation, the client is the student athlete, or they like to call them, at least they like to call them student athletes. So what is the best thing for them?
Yeah, the athlete part for sure.
Right. Well, the games are going to still be played. We do know that. They're not canceling the season. So the big question everyone wants to know now is Duke going to win it all this year after the other team won it last year?
Yeah, the other team. I wiped that from my memory.
Well, in Ohio State, when we talk about that other team, we call them that team up north. So I don't know what you call your buddies down on
I have too many friends. Yeah. I have too many friends that are Carolina fans, so I have to be nice, especially if they might listen to it. So, it's very difficult to win the national championship in college basketball. I think Duke will be the most talented team. They have Grayson Allen, who hopefully has his head on straight this year. He's pretty polarizing. But then they have Marvin Bagley, who's one of the top 3 picks in next year's draft. Wendell Carter, who will be a lottery pick, Trayvon Duval, who can hit his head on the rim at point guard. If you put a gun to my head, I would say no, because it's very difficult for a team that's going to start 4 freshmen or 3 freshmen, a sophomore, and 1 senior to kind of gel and get everything together. And so much of it depends on health. But I think Michigan State, with Miles Bridges and coming back for a second year and all those guys, they'd be my favorite. But Duke will be up there. They'll have the opportunity to win, and I think Coach K is locked in after last year's debacle with all the injuries and the Grayson Allen stuff. I think he's locked in to make it a great year.
Yeah, and you're going to enjoy it nonetheless. Whatever happens, whatever comes your way, I'm sure you're going to be watching the games and enjoying it, right?
A little bit too much, yeah.
Yep, that's right. All right, so one more prediction we ask every guest on the show, or try to ask every guest on the show. We're into the season. We're 4 weeks into the NFL season when we're recording this. It might come out a little bit later, but give or take, who is going to win the Super Bowl this year?
The only thing that makes sense after 4 weeks in the NFL is that the Buffalo Bills are going to win the Super Bowl.
That's right. All right.
I mean, if
it's what we all expected, David. Yeah.
Anybody before the year, they would say the Patriots have a good chance to go 16-0, and New England probably should be 1-3, right? I mean,
I would agree.
Houston lost, so I don't know. I think obviously it's going to come down to injuries, but in all seriousness, if you made me pick today, I wouldn't say the Bills. I would say the Steelers, just because they've got a younger defense. They've got the winning pedigree, a good quarterback, and I think it'll be one of the teams that has one of those Hall of Fame quarterbacks that gets it done.
Yeah, usually the case. Well, David, I want to allow you to leave some final words of encouragement to anyone listening, and then follow that up with how you want people to connect with you, whether it be social, email, or phone, whatever you like.
Yeah, I would just, my words of encouragement are just to be in the moment, to make today count. We're not promised anything else. We as a society, and me personally, I'm certainly guilty of looking ahead to what's next all the time, and not really just enjoying the opportunity to be with your family, with your wife, to be with your friends, or with your clients, whoever you're with. Just take that time and really be engaged. And if anybody wants to contact me, My email is david@abidingwealthadvisors.com. That's our company's website, abidingwealthadvisors.com. And then phone 910-494-3622. But Eric, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this podcast series, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed the moment of recording this podcast with you, so we appreciate you taking the time and talking with us. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
David, it was absolutely awesome having you on this podcast. The way David makes others around him better is a great example of a business owner doing things right. The perspectives he brings from being a leader in the financial services industry and on this podcast specifically are now perspectives you as a business owner and entrepreneur can use for yourself. And for that, David, thank you. And for any business owner or entrepreneur that has planning needs, I would encourage you to reach out to David. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can contact me on Twitter at Eric_Kaz or with the same name on Instagram. Or you can find us at KazSource.com with links to us on the different social networks. Thank you for listening to our KazSource podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time. Until next time, we're out of here. A big thanks to Rods Racing for their support of this podcast and allowing us to contribute to their inspiring cause. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It's a big deal to us. We hope you found value in it, and if you did, we would be incredibly grateful if you gave us a review on iTunes. Remember to subscribe to this podcast and feel free to share it with anyone you know. More than anything, thank you again for listening. We appreciate it.